recording. You ready to do it?
Let's go.
Okay. All right. So 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, folks, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. I am very excited to have as my guest today, Krista St-Germain. Krista, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me.
You are welcome. So Krista is a master certified life coach, post-traumatic growth and grief expert, widow, mom, and host of the Widowed Mom Podcast. When her husband was killed by a drunk driver in 2016, Krista's life was completely and unexpectedly flipped upside down. After therapy helped her uncurl from the fetal position, Krista discovered life coaching, post-traumatic growth, and learned the tools she needed to move forward and create a future she could get excited about. Now she coaches and teaches other widows so they can love life again too. Welcome to the podcast. Wow. All right. Before we get going here, share with the listeners where you're from originally and where you are currently.
Same. I'm from Wichita, Kansas. I'm still here. I never left.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
So very intense.
Yeah.
Let's get to the story here. So what happened?
Yeah. So I was 40. I was on my second marriage. It's kind of my redemption marriage, right? The first one went down in flames, had 2 kids, and I was just at an all-time high in my life. I really believed firmly that my best days were in front of me. I was just extremely happy. And we had gone on a trip. It was a volunteer trip. We came back. We had driven separately, and I had a flat tire, pulled over to the shoulder of the highway. He pulled up behind me. We had AAA, but he was stubborn. He knew he could change the tire faster than AAA could probably get there. And so he said, just let me change it. I just want to get home. Let's just change it. So I'm standing on the side of the road, texting my then 12-year-old daughter to let her know that we would be late. And he's digging into my trunk in between his car and mine, trying to get access to the spare tire. And a driver who we later found out had both meth and alcohol in his system did not see us. It was broad daylight. We had our hazard lights on, but he didn't see us, didn't brake, and just crashed right into the back of Hugo's Durango and trapped him in between his car and mine. Yeah. And within a day, what felt like the best life ever just kind of felt like the worst life.
Where were you
ever.
positioned?
I was actually standing off on the shoulder.
Okay.
And I was looking down. So I was looking at my phone, texting my daughter, and I just heard the noise. So fortunately, I wasn't there. Fortunately, my children weren't there.
Right.
But, didn't save him.
So how do things unfold?
Yeah, I mean, initially, there was an intense day of chaos in the hospital where they were trying to save him. They tried really hard, ended up actually being a combination of things, an error that was made in the hospital, trying to perform a procedure that had some known risks. It didn't work to our advantage, and he coded, and, they tried CPR for about it was like an hour. They're trying to bring him back, and it just didn't work. So, yeah, he died, and that was just kind of it. So it just felt like the rug got pulled right out from under me. I had a brilliant therapist who had helped me through my divorce before. And so I almost immediately went back to her. Right. And that's what helped me get through those early acute days, was just talking about it, right? Being able to tell the story as many times as I needed to tell it without feeling like I was burdening other people around me. So yeah, it was really crazy there for a while.
So you, okay. How long was it from the time you gotten divorced to this moment?
Okay. So I got divorced in 2014. And yeah, this was 2016. So we had recently married. We had married in April. And it was August. So we were practically newlyweds, and we had just kind of gone on our honeymoon, and we had been living together for a while, but we had just married. So yeah, it was like,
divorce is crazy and traumatic. I'm going through divorce right now, actually.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm with you.
And then to experience this, what do you do?
Yeah.
What do you do? What do you think? What was your process? You said you had a brilliant therapist.
I did. A huge part of my process, and different things for different people, right?
Sure.
So when I say it, I don't intend for it to be like prescriptive or anything, but what helped me was a lot of journaling I just wrote a lot. And I wrote a lot of letters to him. In fact, I just started a journal, and when I felt like it was, dear Hugo, and here's how my day went, and here's what happened, and I can't believe this happened, and I can't believe you're gone, and here are all the things I don't want to forget, and here are all my worries and fears, and I just kind of got it all out, and that was helpful for me. I spent a lot of time on my back porch, which for me was very therapeutic because there's nature back there. You know, I found a lot of peace and solitude. I had a very supportive family who gave me a break, right? Watched my kids when I needed to be alone. He and I actually worked together at the same company. So that was a gift because so many of my coworkers knew him. In fact, some of them knew him better than I did. They'd known him for 20 years. I'd only been there for 10 years. He'd been there for longer than I had. And so I had a really supportive community there. I have been a fan of tapping for, I don't know, a decade or more. And so fortunately I had that tool in my back pocket as well. So I did some tapping, and I just did a lot of talking to my therapist. I tried to read. Before this loss, I had always been the person who went to books and experts, but I did have quite a lot of widow fog, grief fog, and it was hard for me to read and retain. So I did try to read. It wasn't as productive as I had hoped it would be, but at least I got a little bit of an education about grief in the small amount of reading that I did. Because I came into it only knowing the 5 stages of grief and thinking that that's what it was supposed to be. And so at least I did a little bit of reading to realize, okay, that's not fully representative of what most people experience. And I don't need to be cramming myself into those little boxes. Just talking about it. It was crazy. I don't even remember a lot of it, to be honest.
Yeah. What were some of the things that, people reach out and they try to be supportive?
Yeah.
And sometimes what people say, excuse me, even though they're trying to be supportive, just it doesn't feel right for you. What were some of the things that didn't feel right for you when at a particular time?
Yeah. He's in a better place. Don't worry, you're young. You'll find someone else. At least he's no longer suffering, right? Things that I think people, again, they mean well, but they don't have the capacity to sit with us in our emotion. And so they say things to try to make us feel better. And, a lot of women that I work with now, because I work with widows, are very offended when people say things like that. I didn't receive it in that way. I could tell people were trying to help and they just didn't understand. And so I didn't really push back or try to correct them. I just said, thank you.
What sense did you make of this? Did you feel it was necessary to, okay, maybe it means this or it means that? Did you think in those terms at all?
Not really. I really more thought about, okay, this is the part where I'm going to have to separate what I can control from what I can't. And originally I did quite a lot of woulda, shoulda, coulda kinds of thinking. If I just had that tire checked, if I had just pulled up further on the shoulder of the road, because where it happened was kind of a narrow spot. If I had just insisted we call AAA, I could have prevented this. And I did a lot of that thinking. And then I just kind of realized at some point that that thinking wasn't going to take me anywhere productive, and that it really didn't matter what I would have, could have, should have done, because I didn't. Right. And I did the best at the time with what I knew, and it happened. And that's it. Right. I don't have to rail against that it happened. I don't have to love that it happened, but I do have to acknowledge that it happened. And I found a lot of power in that I could just acknowledge that it happened and then decide, okay, now what? Right? Who do I want to be given that it happened?
Right. Did you feel it was necessary to ascribe a certain meaning to it? Because obviously there are a lot of religions out there that have certain ways of looking at things like this. And
no, in fact, it was interesting. The trip we were coming back from is a camp program for children who are blind or visually impaired. It's called Heather's Camp. And it's a camp that I created. It was like, I created it. Yeah, I know. Right. In 2000 with some friends of mine. One of our friends was murdered, and we created that camp in her memory.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so, yeah, I know it was a really pivotal experience in my early 20s. And so I remember thinking about it like that, thinking that made no sense to me, how something that awful could happen to someone that wonderful. Like it made no sense, right? 4 people were killed in that event, we'll say, in my community, and they were all young and amazing, and they did nothing wrong, and it just didn't make any sense. And I never really needed it to make sense as much as I needed to decide who I wanted to be in it, right? And do something that for me added value to the world, right? And took something and tried to bring some good into the world because of it. And so I knew that could be done because we had done it for Heather. And so I could imagine that could be done in this situation, but there was never a moment where I really needed to know why or believe that it happened for the greater good or some higher purpose. That didn't resonate with me.
Right. Or whatever meaning. I mean, people can ascribe, this, I'm ascribing a certain meaning to it. And therefore that's how I'm going to get through this. But you didn't need to do that. And again, people work through these things in very different ways. But what I'm hearing you say is, I acknowledge it happened. It did happen. And okay, what am I going to do? What am I going to do moving forward?
Now
how am I going to take action? So what did you do?
Well, eventually I went back to work. That actually was helpful because, again, so many people knew him and loved him. And I just tried to get back to functioning first. And then, I spent a few months in what I would say is like a functioning, but very hollow and robotic place where, people are saying, "Oh, you're doing great. And you're so strong." And you're like, is this what great feels like? 'Cause I don't think I feel great. And, yeah, I actually had decided, okay, I think I want a career change. My therapist was telling me to become a therapist. She was saying, like, this, you were meant to do this. Come do this. You can work for me. She had it all planned out.
Why? What
I
made
will
her
help
say
you
that?
get in. I think she recognized in me what many people did, and probably what, any therapist probably feels this way, that you're the kind of always that person that people come to, right? They always want your opinion. They always want your insight. You feel the need to help. You are compelled to help. And I think she saw that in me too. And, I had nothing to do with my career in terms of what I did technically, right? I worked in aviation and I was in a management role. It really didn't have anything to do with project management or the kinds of projects that I did. It was the kind of person that I was and the role that I filled for people. And so I thought, yeah, maybe that is what I'll do. And so I enrolled in an MFT program and I was waiting for it to start. I needed to go back and get an abnormal psych class because I didn't have that in my bachelor's degree, and that was a requirement. And so as I was waiting for this semester for the MFT program to start, it was going to take about 8 months before it actually started. It just so happened that a life coach I had been following started a program that made sense for me to join. And so I joined it, and it was so powerful for me that then I went from, well, I'll go through MFT school, and on the side, I'll also go through life coach certification. So maybe that'll be kind of my side hustle, because it's going to take a couple of years to, get through that program. And before it started in August, I had completely talked myself out of it and decided that coaching was actually the path I wanted to take. It was so powerful for me that I was like, nope, it actually feels scarier to be a coach, because in my mind, coaching was still a little sketchy in terms of how other people would see it versus, therapy has a path and a certification, and it's got credentials, and it seems a little bit more respected. But I just decided, no, this is not what I was meant to do. I was meant to be a coach. And
so what about that particular program was so powerful for you?
It just helped me so much. It helped me make sense of how to manage my own life, right? It felt very tangible and practical and applicable. It just all, it, yeah, it was crazy to me that I could have spent so much time in therapy. And this is no insult to my therapist or anything that I did, but the amount of time that I spent working on myself prior to this compared to what I experienced in that short window of time, the amount of change was so dramatic for me, so dramatically different. And I just attribute it to the tools in that particular approach.
Well,
That I
can you be
just went
more
all in on that
specific?
one.
Because this sounds really good.
Okay.
You
So
got to be more specific, Krista.
I had an inkling before that I was not my thoughts, right? That I was the thinker of my thoughts and that thoughts mattered, but I didn't know how to actually create any change with that, right? I didn't have a tool that helped me recognize when a thought was moving me toward what I wanted or away from what I wanted, right? I didn't understand how to cultivate thoughts. I didn't understand how to change beliefs. I didn't understand how to, because what I was struggling with was this little voice in the back of my mind that was saying, your best days are probably behind you. You should probably just be grateful for what you had, because it's probably never going to get any better than it was. Like, that's as good as it gets. Nobody's going to love you like that. Nobody's going to, appreciate you and your shadows and all of that like he did. Like, it just doesn't get any better, right? And it felt so real. I wanted to believe it was optional.
Right.
But until I got a tool that said, okay, here's how you identify a thought as a thought. Here's how you truly tell the difference between what your brain is observing and the observation, so that you can change it, right? So that you can stop believing your own cognitions and start actually choosing on purpose what you want to think. Does that make sense? Yeah. For me, that was everything. Just being able to have it. So I went to the life coach school, and I don't know if you're familiar with the life coach school, but Brooke Castillo has created a very elegant but applicable tool called the self-coaching model, or the thought model. And it simply says that there are things that happen in the world, circumstances, right? Those circumstances don't create our feelings. They don't have any power over us. Then we have a thought about them, and that thought creates our feeling, and that feeling drives our actions, and those actions create our results. And so, yes, we have tens of thousands of thoughts every day, but we don't need to model them all. But generally speaking, how do we help ourselves by understanding what our own thinking is creating? And once we see it as optional and separate from who we are, then we can get some leverage over it and choose something different, right? And that, and also just learning how to allow feelings in a way that I hadn't before. I really always saw them as problems to solve. I did not see them as experiences to allow. And shifting into that experience of realizing, no, actually, negative emotion is supposed to be part of life. It is not something I need to change. It's just something I need to learn to let flow through me. That was news to me.
So you enrolled in this school, you got certified. How long was the certification process?
The certificate, that at that point in time, there was an in-person component, which was a week long. And then there was a practicum follow-up that was another 6 months. So I went in August and then finished by December. So I guess not quite 6 months.
Okay. So whole career change.
And then I left my job. I certified in December. I quit my job in January. I actually went to go and do a job for the life coach school. They had hired me, and it was on a temporary trial. Thank goodness, because I don't think I'd ever left my job if they hadn't done that. But they hired me. I went. It didn't work out. I actually was only there for about 6 months or 6 weeks. And then Brooke said, "I love you. But it's not working." And I was like, "You're right. It's not working." And then I just decided I'm not going back. I'm not going back to my old job. I'm going to make this work. And so then I went to coach on my own.
So you coach on your own. Now, what did you want to bring to being a coach?
When I certified, I actually didn't want to do grief. I didn't want to do anything with grief. It was a little bit too early in my own work at that point in time. I imagined I would be sad all of the time. It seemed like it would be just too heavy. And so I didn't go into coaching with the intention of helping people in grief. It wasn't until I actually certified and I was done with the certification, and through the course of the certification had to do more of my own work, that it started becoming apparent to me that it didn't make sense for me to do anything else, right? Like, that's what made sense to me, was to give people a better experience than what I had, or at least the tools, so that if they wanted to have a better experience than I had, it would be more readily available to them. And so at that point, I decided, okay, I think I'll work with widowed moms. And what I see so often, and when you asked me what it was like too, when he died, when I went online for resources, it was so depressing. what I saw was just a lot of, people not knowing that post-traumatic growth was possible, right? Not knowing that it actually is possible to love life again. And that if you choose to do that, it doesn't mean you didn't love your person.
Mm-hmm.
I just found a lot of, well, it's been 10 years and I'm still crying every day. And, it was just really depressing. And, I never have an agenda for what someone should do, but I want to expand their idea of what's possible for them. And when they use new normal as a resignation, I can't have it, right? I just can't have
Mm-hmm.
it. There's just no reason to do that to ourselves. And so, I like expanding people's ideas of what's possible and then giving them the tools that they can use to help themselves get where it is that they want to be and have the life experience that they want, even though this awful thing happened.
Right, right. So, two things I want to ask you about. One, you mentioned you wanted to provide maybe a better experience than you had. What do you mean by that specifically?
Well, specifically, I didn't know that feelings weren't problems to solve, right? I spent a lot of time trying to get away from them and avoid them. I didn't know much about grief. And so I thought, there's an end to it. And if I just follow the steps, surely there are some steps and I just need to find them and follow them, right? And if I
Yeah.
follow them, I will get to the end.
Someone's
And
listed them somewhere.
right. And I bet there's a grade and I could probably get an A, right? That's my personality. And just really, when you live in a culture as we do that doesn't do a great job of normalizing grief, right, and helping people learn coping skills so that they can have a better experience of their emotions, we end up with a lot of suffering that is unnecessary, and just a lot of you know yeah, I mean, I'm just going to say suffering. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't need to eat my feelings, right?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't need to try to avoid them. So many women are out there thinking, well, I just got to get through the first year. I'll just hold on, you know, and it
Walk
doesn't
us
work that way.
through. I just want to remind everyone that I'm speaking with Krista St-Germain. Krista, what's the best way for people to get in contact with you?
Well, I have a podcast, the Widowed
Okay.
Mom Podcast. They can listen to that, or coachingwithkrista.com. All my contact information is there.
Coaching with Krista.
Krista.com.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'll have that linked up at the show notes
Sure.
page at the traumatherapistpodcast.com, as well as your podcast. Awesome. Talk a little bit about that. So, granted, everyone's experience is different, but walk us through, give us a taste of when someone comes to you and they are operating on, well, this is my new normal. How do you work with them? Give us a
Yeah.
taste of what you do.
So I work with people who are in that kind of what I call a grief plateau, meaning that they're mostly beyond that acute grief. They're back to functioning. It's no longer a challenge to take a shower, right? The grief fog has, for the most part, passed. They are, to the outsider's eye, they look as though they are back to normal, but on the inside, they don't feel like they want to feel, right? So that's the spot where I can be of the most value. And they might potentially know that more is possible or want something more. They just don't exactly know how to get it, right? And so the two things that I focus on primarily, and then we kind of get into the specifics that specific areas of application, but the two things that I focus on are helping them change their relationship with their feelings, first and foremost, and then change their relationship with their thinking. Right? When we do those two things, it's like dominoes, right? We knock down those two dominoes, then all the other dominoes can start to fall. So when we shift from thinking that feelings are problems to solve, right, to believing that feelings are just experiences to allow, right, to shifting from believing that feelings are something that we are at the effect of, as opposed to something that we can actually create with our thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Those kinds of shifts. And that happens through experience. So I literally teach them what a feeling is and how to feel it, how to let it flow through. And we practice. Right. And I'm a big fan of tapping, like I said. So I teach tapping as well. And then we start thinking about our feelings. Like a lot of what we dread when it comes to feelings isn't the actual feeling itself, right? What we dread when it comes to feelings is all the resistance that we create in our mind. So we work on how do we remove, I call it clean and dirty pain, right? How do we remove all the dirt so that we don't have this extra awful experience, but yet still allow pain, because pain is always going to be there. It's always going to be part of our human experience. It is supposed to be there. But when we're trying to get away from it or avoid it or make it go away or afraid to allow it, and so many widows, they're so afraid that if they let themselves feel, they'll fall apart.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That they'll go into a black hole and they'll never come out. Or, that now because they're the ones parenting and there's no other adult there to help them, they don't believe that allowing themselves to feel is a luxury that they can afford.
Mm.
And so they're just gripping.
Right.
And so helping them, see that they actually can. And it really isn't the black hole that they think. And through experience, developing some confidence that they really can let feelings flow through. And if that's the worst part of grief and we get good at that, then everything gets easier.
Yeah. Wow. That's intense. I'm kind of relating to a lot of what you were saying. I don't think it's just applicable to widowed moms.
Yeah.
But let's briefly talk about your podcast. What's the name of the podcast?
The Widowed Mom Podcast.
Okay. And what do you do there?
It's very niched. Yeah. All things grief, all things post-traumatic growth, all things. Usually when people listen to my podcast and they are widows, they come away and they tell me, it's like you were reading my mind, right? I'm just being honest. I'm just being honest about the struggles and how we can think about them differently and traverse them and navigate it, because it's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, especially when you were saying in the beginning, you had gotten divorced and you got into this marriage and you were like, this is it, all in. What did you say? It was your redemptive?
Yeah, it felt like my redemption story, right?
Redemption
it's like proof
story.
that amazing relationships are possible and you can be treated the way you want to be treated. And yeah.
Man. Krista, thanks so much for coming on here and sharing your story and being open. It's intense, man. And I really appreciate the way you've talked about how you've moved forward. I think it takes a lot of energy and guts and courage to move forward, to make that decision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it does, but anybody can do it, right? It's not,
but not everybody
not to diminish
does.
myself, but like what I really want people to hear is that it's not just for the special snowflakes, right? Anybody can choose to still love life no matter what happens.
Yeah. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. We'll be in touch. All right.